Russell Brand was a sex addict with plenty of tattoos. He is no longer a sex addict now, but he still has his tattoos. His entire body is covered in tattoos, and he does not hesitate to show them off. On his right arm, he has chakras that travel downwards. These chakras represent sexual energy, energy of the heart, energy of communication, and energy of the will, among others. On his right index finger, he has a kundalini serpent that represents sex energy. On his bicep, he has a tattoo that says, "Go with the flow," inked in Sanskrit. On his shoulders down to his wrist, he had a quote from Oscar Wilde tattooed. It says, "If you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you." This quote is relevant to the kind of life Russell Brand has lived. For over 40 years, he has performed self-destruction. He has become an alcoholic, bulimic, attention addict, and a drug addict. At present, he promotes his most recent book entitled Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions. It tells about his journey towards recovery. It discusses the 12-step program that he has undergone. According to Brand, these 12 steps have saved his life. He wants to help you save your life too by following these 12 steps. Russell Brand has really shown a great deal of improvement. He said that the root of every addiction is narcissism, which is a continuous thrumming attention to oneself. Thus, if you are self-absorbed, you suffer. Conversely, when you suffer, you find ways to stop it. Unfortunately, most people try to stop their sufferings by using drugs, sex, and alcohol. Today, more kinds of addictions have come up, such as social media addiction. You might think that using social media platforms, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, is not harming anybody. In reality, however, you are harming yourself. When you use too much social media, it starts to consume your life. Just like with any other addiction, it negatively affects the way you function in society. It affects your work, studies, and relationships. In addition, when you suffer, your loved ones suffer as well. Not only do they suffer from the burden that you cause, but they also suffer from seeing their loved one struggle through addiction. Russell Brand adds that people who fall into addictions often do so in attempt to solve their inner problems externally. Sometimes they feel that something is missing in their lives, which is why they try to fill it by using drugs, alcohol, etc. They feel pain, which is why they try to numb themselves. However, pain cannot be ended with another pain. This has been summed up perfectly by Eckhart Tolle. According to Tolle, addiction begins with pain and often ends with pain as well. What does this mean exactly? Alcohol, sex, and drugs, for instance, are not the ones that cause you to suffer. Instead, it is your addiction or lack of control over their use that makes you suffer. Your life goes out of control when you are not able to control your usage of these substances or things. Russell Brand believes that addiction is akin to a morphing and mutating germ that continuously varies in his life. He adds that the sensation and the experience are the continuum. Moreover, Brand says that healing requires believing in a higher power. You have to give yourself to this higher power so that you can be healed. It does not matter how you comprehend it. You just have to surrender. You have to have faith and not try to overthink. After all, you are an addict and your judgment is clearly clouded. This is why you have to surrender completely. Trust the process and believe that the higher power will take care of you. For most of his life, Russell Brand has experienced problems when dealing with authority. This is why he encourages everyone to stop thinking about the higher power in a negative manner. Sadly, a lot of people have this notion that the higher power is cruel and domineering. Brand says that you need to think otherwise in order for you to be healed. You should think of the high power as nurturing and accepting. While Brand has not completely turned his back on the foundation of the 12-step program, he still managed to find a universal workaround. He claims to create a territory that brings about different conversations on spirituality. He says that this is for the benefit of atheists or individuals who are naturally humanist. Likewise, this may benefit those who are just plain cynical. Brand assures everyone that the recovery tent is huge and can accommodate anyone. He encourages them to step inside and experience it for themselves. Russell Brand is a persuasive speaker as he talks about the evils of consumerism as well as its connection to addiction. He entices every member of the audience. All of those who listen to him hang onto his every word. His book about addiction has many excellent points. The good thing about Brand is that he does not act like a typical spoiled celebrity. When someone gives him a compliment about his book, he doesn't feign surprise or humility. He doesn't act like he's used to receiving praise all the time. Instead, he acts like a serious child who hears praise for the first time. He seems pleased and doubtful at the same time. He also shows a raw neediness, which makes him more charismatic to his audience. He is practically a man that screams, "I want," every time he moves or speaks. This kind of behavior is what makes him a good follower of the 12-step program. It makes sense. Addicts are lonely people who get better by searching for community and connection. Since Brand is genuinely interested in what other people have to say, he connects with them and actually wants to be a part of them. His desire to be part of the community inspired and motivated him to change his ways and become a more improved version of himself. For the first part of his life, Russell Brand had very little sense of connection. As a young boy, he was very unhappy. It is quite easy to imagine the life he used to live just by looking at him now, or recalling the moments when he was addicted to drugs, sex, and alcohol. If you think that is already bad, his formative years were even worse. He grew up in Essex. He was sensitive and frequently bullied. He wet his bed and played with gerbils. Even though he had a loving mother, she was ill with cancer. She was always being treated for the disease, and this situation caused Brand to be the object of his stepfather's contempt. His biological father was addicted to porn and sex. All he wanted to do was to go to Thailand for vacations and make his son experience being with hookers. His experience with his father led Brand to write a memoir in 2007 entitled My Bookie Wook. Here, he wrote about being touched as a young child and feeling the warping. Eventually, Brand grew up to be a bounder with increasing popularity. He became known for his taste for heroin, chocolate, chaos, and sex. Everybody knew about him and his strong addiction to these things. Because of this, he had gained many enemies. He had chaotic personal and professional lives. Come to think of it, the whole ordeal was kind of impressive. It is pretty unusual to read about a person who is so good with antagonizing authoritative figures. Ever since he was young, Brand has always had issues with authority. He carried this issue to adulthood. In 2013, he attended the GQ Awards and was escorted out of the venue due to the words he said. He accused Hugo Boss, a sponsor of the event, of making uniforms for Nazis. He added that these uniforms looked fantastic, even though they were for the Nazis. Today, Russell Brand has been sober for 14 years. He used to be a bad student, but he became a really good one when he started following the 12 steps towards recovery. For days, he locked himself up in his room. This is in compliance with the fourth step, which is about making a fearless and searching moral inventory for yourself. When it comes to patching things up with others or making amends, Brand admitted that he had a really hard time with this department. It is expected of a celebrity with easy access to various women to be disliked. Brand admitted that a lot of people did not want to hear from him. Nonetheless, his main objective for explaining details with regard to recovery was to show that the 12 steps are simple, easy, and straightforward, and that anyone can actually do it as long as they are willing. You may feel lost or in the dark. However, if you really want to recover, you will be able to do it. Brand even claimed that his qualification is not that he is better than anyone, but that he is actually worse. Struggles will always be present. It is also possible that you will never escape them entirely. Nevertheless, you can completely abstain from alcohol and drugs, for these addictions are detrimental to life. On the other hand, the addictions that are regarded as life-giving, such as sex and food, can be imposed with structure. Russell Brand is a vegan, although he eats eggs sometimes. Then again, because he thinks that he is responsible for the objectification and commodification of women, he does not allow pornography anywhere near him. According to Brand, a happy and good outgrowth of recovery is a new territory of domesticity. For him, this is Laura Gallagher, his wife, and Mabel, their daughter, who is 10 months old. Mabel is actually often credited by Brand for helping him keep his self-absorption at bay. He jokes that his daughter is difficult to deal with. He seems very happy with his family life. Aside from his wife and daughter, Brand also has a dog named Bear. He describes his dog to be his spirit animal. He also says that Bear wants to eat life to death in a very loving way, and that this makes him identify with it because it is what he used to want to do. The 12 Steps. Russell Brand begins this chapter by claiming that he hates systems. He does not like them because they are structured. Brand prefers to be free and do whatever he wants. He does not want to follow any rules. He also believes that the world is judgmental and that other people judge him by the things he does. Nonetheless, he does not seem to care at all. He claims to be a hustler, a poet, and a maverick. He claims to be an individual who cannot be told what he needs to do. Brand was headstrong. He was a rebel. He rebelled against a lot of things. He lived life according to his own terms. He did not think of the future. He did not consider anybody at all. He resisted the 12 steps at first because he did not believe that they would actually work for him. In addition, Brand disliked the fact that the word God was mentioned in the 12 steps over and over. He simply did not understand that the main point of the program was to surrender completely to the higher power. He scoffed at the 12 steps and thought that they would be effective for other people, just not him. Later on, the principles of addiction were examined. It was found that egotistical thinking and self-centeredness are the defining attributes of an addictive situation. Keep in mind that self-centeredness is a very tricky thing, and it encompasses more than mere vanity. It has way deeper roots. In essence, the 12 steps are as follows. 1. You admit that you are powerless over your addiction and that your life has become unmanageable. 2. You believe that there is a power greater than yourself who can restore you to sanity. 3. You make a conscious decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand Him. 4. You make a fearless and searching moral inventory of yourself. 5. You admit to God, to yourself, and to someone else where you have gone wrong. 6. You are completely prepared to have God take away all your character defects. 7. You humbly ask God to take away your shortcomings. 8. You create a list of the people you have harmed and become willing to make amends towards all of them. 9. You make direct amends to other people, except on occasions where you would have injured them. 10. You continue to take personal inventory, and you promptly admit when you are wrong. 11. You seek through meditation and prayer to improve your connection with God as you understand Him. You pray for knowledge of His will for you as well as for power to carry it out. 12. You have a spiritual awakening, so you try to carry the message to addicts as well as practice the principles in everything you do. Are you a bit fucked? The first step of the program and your first step towards wellness is to admit that you are powerless over your addiction and that your life has become unmanageable. This brings you to a crossroad. A part of you wants to change your negative behavior, while another part wants to keep holding on to it. According to Brand, recovery is a journey towards awareness from a lack of awareness. Brand claims to have felt like he was too smart for anything. He even thought that religion was dumb. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. Then, he had a couple of serendipitous moments one day. First, he was introduced to the 12 steps by an atheist. Second, he became desperate and broken. Brand felt hopeless and useless, so he immersed himself into drugs and alcohol to stay functional and upright. He did not have a plan. He did not have a clue as to what to do next with his life. He was anxious, so he kept distracting himself. What he exhibited was a cycle of addiction. The following is a 5-point guide to this cycle. Pain, use of addictive agents such as food, alcohol, sex, dependent relationship, and work to distract and soothe, temporary distraction or anesthesia, consequences, guilt, and shame that cause low self-esteem or pain. Brand was trapped in this cycle for a long time. He was in pain. He did not feel good enough. He used addictive agents to try to numb the pain. First, he used sugar. He ate tons of chocolate to feel better. He dealt with his feelings using external means. Then again, you should take note that the agent itself is not the problem. Chocolate biscuits are not really bad. It was the way Brand used them that made them toxic and dangerous for him. The third point is temporary numbing. After using the addictive agent, you feel satisfied. The fourth point is consequence. What is the price you pay for your action? Brand recalls feeling awful after eating too many chocolate biscuits. He felt the same after using drugs for a long time. The fifth and final point is pain. Now, you are back to the beginning of the cycle. This is a dangerous path to be on. The more this cycle goes round, the more it gains momentum. It becomes comparable to a carousel that is out of control. Brand recalls feeling the same way when he was a teenager. During that time, he was out of control. In the United Kingdom, you have to be 18 years of age to be allowed to drink liquor. Brand was only 19 when his teachers, as well as medical professionals, noticed that he had a drinking problem. Now that he can think more clearly, he wishes to have identified his addictive tendencies sooner so that he would be able to have dealt with them right away. His addictive behaviors have caused him to suffer grave consequences for years. He was already a heroin addict by the time he turned 27. The first of the 12 steps invites you to admit that you are addicted to something. It can be a drug, an object, a behavior, or a relationship. You are addicted to it if you do not think that you can live without it. It has power over you. Therefore, when you admit that you are powerless, you say that you need a new power and that the current object of your obsession is not worth your time and efforts. Brand made this admission plenty of times. He admitted that he was powerless over alcohol and drugs. When he first knew about the program, his thoughts were, fuck that, and that he needed abstinence. He went on his journey one day at a time. He is now more than 14 years sober. The first step is all about the possibility of change. You can change your relationships, eating habits, sexual behavior, use of substances, spending habits, and of course of your entire life. Then you can ask yourself if you're happy with the change. You can also follow up with other questions to help you gain clarity about your addiction or condition. What do you want to change? What fear or pain do you associate with the change? What kind of pleasure do you gain from not changing? What can it cost you if you do not change? How has your problem jeopardized your important relationships? Have you lost respect because of your problem? Has your home life become unhappy because of your problem? Have you developed any illnesses because of your problem? Have you experienced any abuse because of your problem? What have you done to attempt to control, change, or fix your problem? Why have you not changed if this is truly an important aspect of your life? Are you willing to do everything to have it healed, transformed, or changed? If you answer with a yes to most of these questions, then you have to admit that you are indeed powerless over your addiction and that your life has become unmanageable. You have to write this down, as well as admit that you cannot manage such problems on your own. Could you not be fucked? The second step of the program is about coming to believe that there is a power greater than yourself and that that power can restore you to sanity. There is hope. After you admit that you have a problem and that your life has become unmanageable, you may feel a blow to your ego. Brand claims that after admitting that he had a problem, he felt pathetic and weak. He felt hopeless about not using any drugs because he was used to treating them as necessities for survival. However, there is actual hope, no matter how bad you think your addiction is. Change is difficult. You need to work, analyze, and sacrifice for it. This is why you need to have hope as your foundation. While you do not necessarily have to have unfounded and idiotic optimism, you have to open your heart and allow hope to come in. Give yourself time to process the change. Be a little bit kinder to yourself and be more open to the possibility that your life doesn't have to be awful all the time. Oftentimes, feelings of hopelessness are the first to be felt once an addictive behavior is arrested or challenged. This is why Brand claimed to have taken drugs. He felt hopeless, and taking drugs was the sole reason he could think of to deal with it. In step 1, you admitted that you were powerless over your addiction, and that your addiction holds the power over you. Brand's addiction controlled the choices he had in life. He thought that changing his pattern was impossible, but he was able to do it anyway. If you had seen Brand on December 12, 2002, you wouldn't have probably thought that he could ever change. He seemed hopeless. He was a huge mess. He used drugs all day long. He even used drugs right before he went to the treatment center for alcoholics and drug addicts. He could not help himself. He could not stop, and his life was getting worse every single day. However, just when he thought he could no longer see a way out, he found the power greater than himself. Eventually, he was able to gain back his sanity. He surrendered. He applied the steps to his acting and thinking. He asked help from other people, and he offered help. He had an entirely new perspective. First, you have to admit that you have a problem. Next, you have to hope that you can improve your life. This is all you need to do at this point. Know that there is a better version of yourself somewhere inside you, waiting to be set free. The process of recovery is all about recovering the real you, or the person that you were really meant to become. According to Brand, he goes back to step 2 whenever he feels doubtful of himself or whenever he feels he needs hope. His belief of having a power greater than himself enables him to surrender his old ideas and become a better person. He feels and acts better. Brand adds that being disillusioned with money and fame is no different from being disillusioned with alcohol and drugs. First, you can try using combative proclamations and gaudy philosophy to overcome it. Then, you have to work your program. You always have to remember that your tendencies can always reassert. When you reach the fourth step, you'll realize how the same beliefs and patterns have controlled your life and repeatedly brought you the same despair. It is only by searching for a more powerful magnetic pull that you can completely change such patterns. It can be anything, such as the 12-step program, a support group, nature, or even God. It can be anything, as long as it is caring, loving, and, of course, more powerful than you. Are you, on your own, going to unfuck yourself? The third step of the program is about making a decision to turn your life and your will over to God as you understand Him. Brand was able to reach this step with help from someone who did not believe in God, an atheist. However, if you look at this step more closely and you strip it off with any references to divinity, you will realize that it simply tells you that you do not know what you are doing and that you should accept that. Those who resist step 3 admit that they have a problem and believe that change is possible. However, they think that they can change themselves through cunning, moxie, guts, determination, or self-will. They think that they do not need help from anyone else. Brand struggled with every step of the program. He was fearful of change. One day at the treatment center, he met a counselor named Jackie. She made an impact on him because she did not judge him for using drugs. She commended him for finding something that allowed him to survive. Addicts often easily connect with one another because they are able to relate and understand what the other person is going through. By being acknowledged as an individual who felt pain and was trying to survive, Brand felt understood and optimistic. He felt the compassion that addicts need to motivate them to change. Addiction is lonely and paralyzing. It prevents you from leaving your toxic cycle. Brand had a new ideology that caused him to have a change in consciousness. This ideology can help anyone who's willing to accept it. Brand didn't like being told what to do. He didn't like the idea of not being in control over his destiny. However, he was able to see things differently because he met people who were supportive and kind. First, you have to admit that you have a problem. You have to realize that you can improve. Then, you have to be willing to accept help from others. This third step of the program is about making a decision to turn your life around. You acknowledge that your previous attempts at changing on your own have failed. It is time for you to accept help. For Brand, this is the start of humility, because admitting that one needs help is not easy. Some people manipulate others to meet their needs, while others would rather go on living life without them. Step 3 tells you to ask for help. Brand said that whenever he notices that he is agitated, confused, or fearful, he pauses for a while. He takes a break to process his feelings. He has learned that this is a much healthier way to deal with how he feels than to act without thinking. Write down all the things that are fucking you up or have ever fucked you up, and don't lie or leave anything out. The fourth step of the program is about making a fearless and searching moral inventory of yourself. Brand avoided this step for as long as he can remember. He avoided it like the plague. He had so many insecurities, which often deterred him from making any progress, until he remembered the first 3 steps. It was only when he remembered these steps that he was able to snap back into reality and realize that progress is possible. He recalled wasting many hours watching television, going after pointless relationships, checking out social media, and staring out the window. The distractions that he thought were harmless had actually caused him to go on a downward spiral. Brand claims that it took him 5 years and 2 days to complete step 4. In fact, he did not do anything for 5 years. It was only within those 2 days that he remembered and wrote the things he needed to remember and write. A lot of people cannot be bothered to create a personal inventory. Brand was sober and clean for 5 years. The main objective behind an inventory is to understand and assess the complex and interconnecting beliefs that you have. It is through this step that you can recognize that you have a serious problem with addiction. Brand was told by his mentor, who had previously done the 12 steps, to recall all the people that he knew when he was between 0 and 5 years of age. Then he had to recall the people he met when he was between 5 and 10 years of age. He had to do the same thing for every 5 increments of his age until he reached his present age. As expected, the more Brand grew older, the more people he encountered. However, Brand had a grudge against most of these people. He wrote down their names, as well as the reasons why he was angry at them. He used this list as his inventory of feelings. Such feelings were often the reasons why Brand exhibited destructive behaviors. Step 4 is about evaluating your behavior. You have to find out which aspects of your life are affected by your unconscious behaviors. For Brand, his unconscious behaviors were linked to pride, sexual relations, personal relations, self-esteem, ambitions, finances, and security. Your analysis of yourself and your psyche, as well as its various consequences and attachments, is subjective. This is why you need to have a mentor who can help you out. The 5th step of the program is about sharing your inventory with someone who can guide you and help you realign your views on different events. In essence, you rewrite your past. You change your narrative and program yourself. Your character is the result of the story that you tell yourself. By creating an inventory, you are able to break down hidden destructive personal stories. It is crucial for you to let go of your opinions with regard to how anyone or anything turns out to be. You cannot expect the world to adjust to your whims. You are fucked if you align your happiness with the way you think everyone and everything should be. You should be the one to adjust. You have to adjust your views and send a petition to a higher being to help you. You have to accept the world for what it is. Nonetheless, this does not mean that you should lose your hopes about change. You can change yourself. Step 4 is all about change. Ask yourself questions, such as where you made a mistake. In what area have you been selfish and dishonest? Where you felt afraid, and where you were wrong or at fault. By answering these questions honestly, you can successfully figure out why you feel resentment. If you live your life working on a job you hate, being with someone who is not good for you, having an eating disorder, obsessing over social media, and maintaining an unhealthy lifestyle, you will be discontent. You will stay this way until your last days. Once you are done processing your feelings of resentment, you can gain a much clearer understanding about the coordinates of the world. Next, you have to create another inventory, but this time it is for fear. Write down the things or situations that you are fearful of. For example, you may become fearful of job interviews because you have little confidence in your abilities. You may think that you're not good enough or qualified for the job, so you turn to your object of addiction for comfort. As you have learned previously, this kind of behavior does not end well. When you give in to the temptation of using your object of addiction, you fall back into the toxic loop. Honestly, tell someone trustworthy about how fucked you are. The 5th step of the program is about admitting to God, to yourself, and to another person that you did wrong. Brand worked with his second mentor to accomplish step 5. He wrote about his feelings on 50 to 60 pieces of paper. When he was done writing, he read his entries and realized that most of his resentments were shameful and appalling. Some of them were insignificant and petty. Nevertheless, Brand admitted his wrongdoings to God, to himself, and to another person. He decided that he was ready to surrender. He worked on his inventory and continued recalling memories from his childhood. Brand's second mentor was articulate and charming. He was kind and empathetic. However, he was neither a yogi nor a shaman. He was simply a drunkard who managed to become sober by not drinking one day at a time. Just like Brand, he used the program to improve his life. On the first column on the list, the person or object of resentment was identified. On the second column, the resentment itself was elaborated further. On the third column, the reasons on how it affected the person were written. In addition, Brand claims that the recitation made a huge impact and caused him to have a rational understanding on the different aspects of life. He was finally able to see his patterns of repeated behaviors. He was able to realize that his fears governed his life. For example, his fear of rejection had caused him to be in relationships that lack intimacy. His fear of being alone also led him into the company of those who were not good influencers. To accomplish step 5, you have to consciously declare that you want to change. You have to go to confession to get rid of your emotional baggage. Jung and Freud both listened to their patients as they unloaded decades of anticipated malady. If you are following the original 12 steps, you will read that it is all right to go to confession and bring along a mentor. In addition, if you were abused as a child, there is no reason for you to keep reliving the past. You have to be mindful of the present. You can reprogram your mind. Brand says that his perceptions of reality are biased and changeable. They are not absolute or objective. However, with this kind of program, you can have a support group who can help you start a new life and gain new perspectives. Brand has learned that there was no reason for him to be ashamed and that he could make amends for all the things that he had done wrong. He lived a bad version of reality for a very long time. He was not aware that he had other options and that he could finally deal with his fears. He has also learned, through creating an inventory, that he has an option. In the past, lustful thoughts led to lustful acts. In sharing and inventorying, he has gained perspective. His thoughts are the initial layer of the outside world, and that he is not his thoughts. He can merely observe them. For instance, he begins to think about sex. Instead of acting on it right away, he thinks about his options. He asks himself if he really wants to go for it and if it is good for him. By knowing that he can opt out of it, as well as evaluating its possible consequences, he is able to make a sound decision. The process of confession is recognized and ritualized in many cultures. In steps 4 and 5, the process of confession is modern, connected, and functional. Brand has learned that those who live for flesh give in to urges and drives. When he unloaded everything, he was able to get to know himself much better. He was able to identify what he was and what he was not. He learned that he was not perfect, but he was still lovable despite it. In Alcoholics Anonymous, Step 5 has to be done with a priest, a doctor, or a random person, preferably someone who has undergone the 12 steps himself. The reason behind this is to have someone who can understand the way you expose your genuine self. Refrain from telling your deepest emotional secrets to those who love you or hate you too much. In essence, connection has 3 points. You must connect to your ordinary and earthed self, to your higher self, and to other people. When you do step 5, ask yourself why you do it in the first place, why you do it with the person that you have selected, and what its function is. Well, that's revealed a lot of fucked up patterns. Do you want to stop it? Seriously? The sixth step of the program is being completely prepared to have God take away all the defects in your character. Step 6 is all about healing. Through steps 4 and 5, you were able to determine behavioral patterns and feelings that are painful and unpleasant. Through step 6, you can change them and accept that they do not work well for you. At first, Brand felt unprepared to change his lust. After all, it was nothing but fun and natural. However, it was still a defect of character. According to Serenity, defects of character typically involve imbalances in the expressions of basic human needs and experiences. For instance, ambition and sexuality are not necessarily bad unless your drives become codependent or imbalanced. You can think of prayer as an attempt to connect with your highest aspect and address resentments such as self-pity, self-centeredness, greed, selfishness, lust, jealousy, envy, pride, dishonesty, intolerance, sloth, arrogance, and impatience. Once you have identified your defects, you can make a decision to either continue with your old pattern or make a change. When you justify your misery, you recommit to it. Brand believes that you accept your suffering and only try to deal with it using external methods. For instance, when you identify lust as your defect, you acknowledge that it is problematic and negative. However, even though you know that this trait is not good, you still do not discard it automatically. Instead, you try to reason out that lust is natural. You may add that perhaps if your partner agrees to sex more often, you will no longer watch porn. Remember that the justifications you make are all obstacles towards change. Recovery only starts when you become willing to actually make a change. You become completely prepared for God to take away the defects of your character. In steps 4 and 5, you have gotten to know yourself much better. By creating an inventory, you were able to see how problematic your thoughts, behaviors, and attitudes have made your life more difficult. With every defect you see, you should ask yourself why you do it and how it helps you. Ask yourself what can happen if you do not change. Conversely, how can your life get better if you become willing to change? Are you really ready to let go of your defects? If you answer with a no, you should determine how your life becomes unmanageable because of your powerlessness to change yourself. Are you willing to live in a new way that's not all about you and your previous fucked up stuff? You have to. The 7th step of the program is about humbly asking God or a higher power to take away your shortcomings. It is all about humility and accepting the limitations of your reality. You have to accept what you are and embrace what you can be. Brand claims that Foucault has said that the idea of an inner connection to a divine being is a linguistic and social construct that you have to let go of, and that you create yourself instead of discover it. Brand disagrees with this notion since he has already had personal experiences with the distinct and transcendent aspects of his consciousness. He says that prayer can be contemporarily viewed as an earnest attempt to communicate with the aspect of your consciousness that has not been tainted with fluctuations or thought patterns by your biochemical impulse. Humility refers to your acknowledgement of your relative insignificance. It does not mean that you have no value. Of course, you are highly valuable. However, your personal wants and drives are often neurotic quirks and tics and biological impulses. that you have subscribed to unconsciously. If you believe that you can only be happy when you are in a certain relationship, but the other person does not seem to conform to your beliefs or even seem interested, then it does not matter. If you let your feelings about your situation affect other aspects of your life, then you are not being humble. Instead, you are being self-centered. Take note that sadness and disappointment exist in the world. Everything is going to disappear one day, so whatever concerns you have are not that big of a deal. Willingness is the key. When you pray to God, you no longer say that you are merely the way you are and that there is nothing wrong about being self-centered. When you review your inventory, you can decide to eliminate your defective patterns and characteristics. You can acknowledge your positive attributes as well as your ability to show love and kindness. The explicit expression of your higher objective is no longer operating on a mundane level of self-fulfillment. You promise to become useful. You become guided by utilitarianism, and you prepare yourself to serve others. Brand says that his goal in life is not just to fulfill his own needs, but rather to make himself available for a higher purpose. He wants to be useful for the benefit of others. The prayer you recite reveals a petition. You seek to have strength, but only so that you can become useful. An effective way to know about the will of God is to ask a person you trust. Brand said that when he recites this prayer, he visualizes doing work from his heart and living his life. Step 7 is a very powerful step that requires continuous effort. Brand admits to slipping up often, but he does his best to stick with the program. He is done with step 6, so he is very much willing to change. He knows that he is off track when he finds himself telling lies just to get what he wants. A prayer is your agreement with the kind of person that you want to become. Whenever you slip up while trying to keep up with this program, you can recite a prayer to help you get back on track. Humbly ask God to take away your defects. You may not be perfect right away, but you will surely improve. Prepare to apologize to everyone for everything affected by your being so fucked up. The 8th step of the program is about making a list of all the people you have harmed, as well as being willing to make amends to each and every one of them. Through steps 1, 2, and 3, Brand was able to change his understanding of God or a higher power. Through steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, he was able to change his understanding of himself. Now, his attention is towards the damage that he has done to other people. He recognizes the fact that a lot of people have been affected by his behavior. Among the many challenges that people often encounter with Step 8 is that it is very similar to Step 9. However, if you look at these two steps more closely, you will see that Step 8 is about creating a list and being willing to make amends, while Step 9 is about actually making amends. You do not project or reflect what making amends can be like. Otherwise, you will disrupt the whole process. When you envisage making amends as you create your list, you may have a tendency to omit certain people from your list. Another challenge that many people encounter with this step is related to forgiveness. When you become willing to make amends towards the people that you have harmed, you also have to forgive whatever harm you believe that they have done to you. You have to understand clearly what amends are for, as well as what they really mean. Basically, amends means to improve or change. It is true that restoration, recompensation, and restitution are all part of the process, but change is still the key. You change when you realize that you no longer want to be the same person you were before. You change when you acknowledge that your way is not working. You change when you start to believe that you can be different and even teachable. You change once you take a good look at yourself and inform other people about it. You change when you become willing to eliminate your negative traits and humbly ask God to take them away. It can be difficult to start over if your past is too damaged and your conscience is filled with shame and guilt. Steps 8 and 9 are necessary to help you change your perception of yourself. Use your resentments to exclusively look at your own behavior. Get over your previous perspective on such events. Refrain from justifying your own behavior when you create your list. Brant claims that the program helped him change his perspectives, when what he would do is justify his perspectives and stay the same. After all, if you do what you have always done, you will get what you have always gotten. It is like doing something over and over the same way and getting the same results every time. If you want to see change, you have to actually make a change. In this case, you have to make amends with the people you have had conflicts with in the past. You have to make amends with the people you have hurt or wronged. There are plenty of ways that you may have damaged institutions or harmed people through your behavior, and not every one of them can be found on the inventory you created during Step 4. It is crucial for you to be able to tell when real harm has been done. You should also be able to tell if you are merely projecting feelings of shame and guilt to other people. In addition, you should undergo this process with the support and guidance of your community to make sure that you do it prudently and safely. The guiding principle behind this is that you do not wish to cause more damage or harm. Now apologize, unless that would make things worse. The 9th step is about making direct amends to the people you have harmed or hurt, except in the cases when doing so will only injure them or others. Brand claims to like this step because he finds it cinematic. The drama and quest that it involves fascinates him. When he reached Step 9, he had already been disenchanted with shallow romanticism. This step is a great example of the intersection of mysticism and pragmatism that this program repeatedly shows. What is the purpose of spirituality if it does not make you feel good? If you do not feel good because of the program, then there is no point in actually doing it. Hence, you may just as well do whatever you have been doing in the past. This step is practical because it is only about action. After creating a list of the people you have hurt and harmed, you are now prepared to make amends. Therefore, you also have to be prepared for soul-searching and researching. Brand said that Step 8 has given him quite a hard time. He found it difficult to be willing. For example, he had a hard time forgiving his stepdad because he had to figure out what kind of amends were necessary. By the time he was ready to forgive him, he was no longer with his mother. He was no longer easily accessible. Because of this situation, Brand was able to find an excuse to simply avoid him. He even tried to justify his avoidance by saying that his stepdad was a quiet person who probably did not like any kind of confrontation. Trying to talk to him about forgiveness might have just been embarrassing. Those who have undergone the 12 steps can attest to the fact that coincidences always occur. They have found people they needed to meet at the right time. Likewise, they have seen signs that influenced their decisions and actions. Since Brand started to pay less attention to materialism and prominence, he was able to encounter coincidences more often. One day he went to the Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. There, he saw the nephew of his stepdad. They talked, and he was able to get his stepdad's phone number. This gave him the chance to call and text him. However, his stepdad did not respond to any of his calls or texts. making him believe that he did not want to speak to him anymore. So he wrote him a letter that told about him taking responsibility of his actions and trying to make amends. He also apologized to his stepdad and wished him well. Even though he did not hear back from him, he was able to see their relationship in a different light. He was also able to realize that he was frequently wrong about his interpretations of other people's behavior, which is why he should stop judging. If Bran had not undergone the program, he would have not been able to make these changes. This step is truly an indication of real change. It made him feel the palpable presence of God every time he made amends with others. He felt unbidden tearfulness and awe. He felt humbled. He also felt the grace that transpires whenever you put aside your own ways and surrender. If you want your life to have more purpose, as well as avoid addressing specific behaviors, you can use the following structure or form for making amends. 1. Inform the person of the harm done. Do not make any excuses and be direct to the point. 2. Ask this person if they wish to comment or say anything. If they do, you should keep your mouth shut and listen attentively. 3. Make a suggestion of the amends that you wish to make. 4. Ask this person if they would like different amends or if they find your suggestion acceptable and good enough. When you make amends to other people, you commit to becoming a different person. Have you ever made amends to anyone, drunkenly or tearfully? Have you ever sheepishly apologized to a friend while not being sure on how to do it? Bran says that the simplest way to make amends is to not make any excuses for your behavior and to allow them to speak. Then again, you should not make amends if doing so will cause further harm. For example, if you have had an affair with someone who is married, you should refrain from making confrontation and offering amends. Likewise, you should not use this step as an excuse to avoid making the amends that you need to make. For example, if you rob a house, you should not go back and apologize to the homeowners to avoid being charged with robbery. You need to follow the guidance of a professional or a mentor. You need someone who can help you complete the steps. Watch out for fucked up thinking and behavior, and be honest when it happens. The 10th step of the program is about continuing to take a personal inventory and promptly admitting when you are wrong. Step 10 is the first of the so-called maintenance steps, which are the steps that should be done on a daily basis to ensure harmony and growth. The main principle behind this step is awareness. Through this step, you will learn to watch yourself and spot the moments when you give up your inner connection and serenity. You petition yourself and your higher consciousness. The self is divided into two, the lower self and the higher self. Your lower self is your ego. It is the mental object that you consider yourself to be prior to undertaking serious analysis. During the times when you are unchallenged, you have to clearly define the ideals that you are willing to work on. Brand says that he is committed to being in a monogamous relationship. One of the roles he has to fulfill in his life is to be a boyfriend. He defines his ideals as a boyfriend as well as what he is working towards. He says that he wants to stay loyal and not cheat. He also wants to be kind, honest, and generous with affection and money. You can have lots of ideals. You just have to determine the areas where you often struggle. Then you should create an ideal that will enable you to counter these areas of struggle. For instance, if you are stuck in a codependent relationship, you can have an ideal that promotes self-sufficiency or independence. The program works because it does not have any doctrine. It does not involve any guru either. It works because it lets the members do their own thing. When you undergo the 12 steps, you have to rely on your own self. You have to be honest and committed. You can gain support from your community without suppressing your individuality. By structure, Step 10 is highly similar to Step 4. When you write down your ideals, you have to create columns. First, you have to write the place, thing, or person that makes you agitated. Then you have to write down your resentment and how it affects you. In essence, Step 10 is just like Steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. It has to be done on a daily basis in order for the program to be effective as a whole. You also need to seek help from a mentor. In this step, you acknowledge that your previous nature, tendencies, and plan will reassert themselves if you do not do anything to make a difference. It's practically a troubleshooting tool that helps you achieve growth. Stay connected to your new perspective. The 11th step is about using meditation and prayer to improve your conscious connection with God as you understand Him. You have to ask Him what His will is for you, as well as how you carry it out, using the power He has given you. When Brand was still addicted, he was disconnected. He tried to reconnect by using alcohol, sex, drugs, food, technology, and other stimulants. He was egocentric and individualistic. Through this step, however, he was able to modify his life through meditation and prayer. He was able to detach from external activities and seek different kinds of connection. Each morning upon waking up, Brand claims to pray to intercept negative thoughts. He asks God to direct his thinking and show him how he can be useful to those who are still addicted and are still suffering. He asks God to show him how he can serve them, as well as how he can be kind, patient, and tolerant. Brand also says that meditation has greatly improved the quality of his life. Because of it, he no longer spends his day engaging in the opinions of others. He enjoys having an internal quiet space that gives him serenity and peace. Brand also swears by the power of the program. He says that it can work for anyone as long as they are truly willing to change. Brand uses the program every single day. He considers it his guide, his sanctuary, and his inner referent. He uses it to remind him that it is meant to help people to stop drinking themselves to illness or death. He recognizes that it is a program that always works in crisis. In meditation and prayer, you observe the crackling grid of past thoughts. You do not readily accept this thinking as right or as a basis for future actions and beliefs. If not for the first 10 steps, Brand would not have been ready for this step. His mind was too restless and giddy, after all. Today, however, he is capable of sitting quietly and turning within. Furthermore, Brand says that prayer is a setting of intention. He prays for God's will and for power to carry this will. He acknowledges that in his former state, or the state he was in before he reprogrammed his mind, the needs of his ego were great. His ego told him a lot of things, which turned out to be superficial and unimportant. This proves that the demands of your ego do not lead to anything good. These demands only lead to suffering. Step 11 is a simple compensation for quitting drugs. It can help you get out of yourself in a safe way, as well as connect you to the great reality. Look at life less selfishly. Be nice to everyone. Help people if you can. The 12th and final step of the program is about having a spiritual awakening after completing all the steps. It is an all-encompassing step because it comprises a life that is lived differently. In this life, there are different perspectives and objectives. As you go through this step, you realize how far you have come since step 1. You are now an entirely different person. You've changed a lot. According to Brand, step 12 gave him an understanding that he will always become self-centered if he does not maintain his spiritual and mental state. You can compare your spiritual life with rowing a canoe away from a waterfall. You get pulled backwards if you stop rowing. Unless you continue to improve yourself, you will always have a tendency to go back to your old self, the self that is addicted to drugs, sex, alcohol, and other things that can harm you. With step 10, you can identify your thinking habits that cause you to revert to your destructive behaviors. With step 11, you can maintain a state of connectivity and serenity. With step 12, you can commit to a different reason for living and a different way of life. Through this step, you can achieve spiritual awakening. You can realize that your problem was caused by your self-centeredness and ego. Step 12 is basically a commitment to live in accordance to your higher self as you undertake the preceding steps. You may never attain perfection, but perfection should still be your aspiration. You have to aim to be the best version of yourself. You should create a life, a world, a community, and a family based on spiritual values. Steps 10 and 11 enable you to stay plugged in and aware. Step 12 makes sure that you are on the right track. It makes sure that you do not go back to the person you used to be, which is the very same person that you worked so hard to change. The 12 Steps program is simple and effective. It works for everyone, including those who are complex. It is composed of timeless and ancient principles, which are overcoming the ego, connecting to the higher self, having a higher purpose, and serving other people. Russell Brand was an addict for many years. All he thought about was himself and how he could feel good at the moment. He was never concerned about other people and how his actions could affect his life or the lives of the people around him. He has hurt a lot of people, including his family, friends, and colleagues. He continued to suffer until he found the 12 steps and was finally able to see the light. Through the 12 steps, he was able to admit that he had a problem and that he needed help. He was able to take an inventory of himself and figure out what was wrong with his thoughts and behaviors. By making a conscious decision to change, he was indeed able to make a change. After all, change is only possible if you are willing and doing it for your own self. You cannot truly change if you do not want to, or if you are only doing it to impress or manipulate other people. The 12 Steps has also enabled Brand to maintain the positive changes he made in his life. He was finally able to make amends with the people he has hurt and recognize that he has options. He did not have to use drugs, alcohol, or sex to fill up the emptiness or to have a distraction. He was able to face and deal with his problems. He was able to be the person he has set to become. You too can achieve change. Just like Brand, you, along with the rest of the world, face many problems in life. Nobody has it easy. Everybody has problems. You just have to know how to deal with them properly. Drugs, alcohol, sex, and other external things are not the solution. Addiction will not make your life better. Stop trying to run away from your problems and start facing them. The 12 Steps can help you. Step 1 helps you identify what you want to change. Step 2 helps you determine if you believe that you can change. Step 3 helps you get in touch with your feelings. Step 4 helps you see your faults more clearly. Step 5 helps you tell another person about your problem. Step 6 helps you identify your character defects and whether or not you are ready and willing to let them go. Step 7 helps you determine if you are indeed willing to commit to change. Step 8 helps you get ready to apologize to everyone you have hurt in the past. Step 9 helps you actually apologize to these people. Step 10 helps you monitor your new changes and ensure that you do not slip. Step 11 helps you be in tune with your higher self. Step 12 helps you view life in an entirely new perspective so that you can enjoy it more.